Connie's Chronicles is a documentary-style exploration of one Yorkshire family's hidden history. It's a journey uncovered through dusty historical archives, century-old census records, whispered family memories, and sudden, unexpected DNA discoveries.
Yeah, it actively pulls you in. Imagine standing behind a bar on a warm summer evening. The pub is crowded and the air is just thick with the smell of spilled ale and salt from the nearby coast.
Right, just a very typical, chaotic summer night.
Exactly. You are wiping down the mahogany counter, you're distracted by a dozen different tasks, and then a man walks up and orders a pint.
You pour it, slide it across the bar.
Yeah. Maybe you exchange a few casual words about the weather or the local football scores. He pays, finishes his drink, and walks out the door.
Just a completely fleeting, perfectly ordinary interaction.
Right. But what you don't know, what neither of you could possibly comprehend in that moment, is that you are brothers.
Oh, wow.
You
yeah.
share a bloodline. He has spent his entire summer walking the streets of this town, desperately searching for his mother, your mother.
That is just, it's chilling to even think about.
It really is. And because of a single missing syllable in the name he is asking for, he walks out of that pub and you will never see each other again.
That image alone, I mean, it captures the terrifying fragility of how our lives are put together.
It really does.
Like one word changes, one conversation doesn't happen, and entire family histories just remain in the dark.
Which is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a 30-page personal memoir titled The Long Road to My Father.
And it is such an incredible true story. It's about a man whose entire understanding of his own identity was dismantled and then slowly, painstakingly reconstructed over the course of more than 2 decades.
Yeah, and it all starts with a piece of paper that, every single person listening to this right now possesses and completely takes for granted.
The birth certificate.
The birth certificate. Think about it. You look at that document when you are a child, you see a name written in ink next to the word father, and you accept it as absolute unshakable truth.
Right, because why wouldn't you? It's the foundation of your identity.
Exactly. You don't interrogate the paperwork that defines you. You just let the adults around you confirm it, and the world moves on.
But this memoir, it asks a really terrifying question. Like, what happens when the ink on that foundational document turns out to be telling a completely different story?
Yeah. And what makes this specific journey so compelling is that the discovery doesn't arrive like a thunderbolt, right?
No, not at all. There's no dramatic deathbed confession here.
Right. It's a slow burn. It begins as a casual hobby in the late 90s, around 1996, and it slowly evolves into this profound reconstruction of a man's identity.
Culminating in a scientific and emotional resolution at 68 years old. I mean, it forces us to examine the psychological weight of our own origins, the undeniable reality of our biology, and ultimately what actually constitutes a family.
But let's go back to the beginning of this, because the way he starts out is just so relatable.
Yeah, very typical for the time.
It's the late 90s, right around 1996 to 1999. He decides he wants to look into his family history. And at the time, he's treating it like a very safe, orderly jigsaw puzzle.
Oh.
He's looking at his mother's roots in Ulrome, which is a small village in Yorkshire. He's finding names, dates, occupations. It's a hobby that brings him comfort.
Well, you have to put yourself in the mindset of an amateur genealogist in the late 1990s.
Right, no internet databases like we have now.
Exactly. This is an entirely different world from the instant spit-in-a-tube genetic testing we have today. This was the era of writing letters to registry offices.
Oh man, waiting weeks for a physical certificate to arrive in the mail.
Yes. Spooling through endless rolls of microfiche in a hushed library. It was deeply tactile, and inherently it felt authoritative.
Because it was literally written down in these massive ledgers.
Right. When you see your family gathered neatly under one roof on a census return written in formal cursive script, it feels solid. There is a deep psychological comfort in that order.
I feel anchored.
We do. We seek out genealogy to stitch ourselves into a larger historical fabric. We want to know the professions of our grandfathers, the towns they built, the wars they survived. We are looking for connection.
Not a crisis.
Exactly. We are rarely looking to dismantle our own sense of self.
Which is why he had this quiet, absolute certainty about the father listed on his birth certificate, a man named George.
The name is right there in the official ledger.
Right there. So he's moving through this research, assuming the map he was handed at birth is perfectly accurate. He's just coloring in the borders.
Just filling in the blanks.
Yeah. And for a few years, it's just a couple of hours a month. It fits neatly around his life, his career, his own family. But then we hit the year 2001.
The first crack in the foundation.
Exactly. A single email arrives. And the email itself doesn't have a dramatic subject line, right?
No, it simply contains a suggestion from another researcher to look at an entry in the 1939 register.
Okay, hold on. For those who don't spend their weekends in historical archives, what exactly is the 1939 register?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Like, why would an email about a document from before the Second World War be the thing that shatters a man's understanding of his own family?
So the 1939 register is arguably the most crucial genealogical document of the 20th century in the United Kingdom.
Wow, okay. Big claim.
It is. Here is the historical context. In September 1939, war had just been declared. The government urgently needed to issue identity cards and organize rationing, but they had a massive problem.
What was that?
Well, the 1931 census had been completely destroyed in a fire during the war, and the 1941 census was obviously never going to happen because of the conflict.
Oh, right. You can't exactly run a census during the Blitz.
Exactly. So they rushed out this National Registration Act. On September 29th, enumerators literally walked the streets of every town and village, recording the exact names, dates of birth, and occupations of every single civilian in the country.
Every single person.
Yes. And because it was tied to rationing, literally how much food you were legally allowed to eat is a highly accurate foundational piece of evidence. People didn't mess around with it.
Okay, so it's not just a casual survey, it's a government mandate taken at a time of absolute national crisis. So he gets this entry, he looks at it, he sees his mother, he sees George, the man named on his own birth certificate as his father.
Which is what he expected to see.
Right, that part completely matches the map he's been using his whole life. But then he looks at the lines beneath them.
This is where everything changes.
He sees 3 children listed in the household.
3 children that no one in his family had ever heard of.
I read that part of the memoir and I physically stopped.
It's stunning.
Not spoken of, not in photographs, not in passing memory. Just 3 completely unknown human beings living with his mother and his father.
Yeah.
Imagine looking at an official government document and seeing your parents listed with 3 strangers. How do you even process that?
Well, the human brain's reaction to that kind of paradigm-shifting information is incredibly consistent. And we see it perfectly illustrated in the author's initial response.
He doesn't panic, right?
No. He does not immediately assume his entire life is a lie. Instead, he treats it as a clerical anomaly.
He just brushes it off.
He actively rationalizes it. He tells himself that, records can mislead, enumerators can make transcription errors. Perhaps it was a different couple with the exact same names.
But the dates of birth were there, the specific locations. How do you just hand-wave that away?
It's hard to imagine from the outside.
I mean, if I saw that, I would be tearing the house apart looking for answers. I'd be calling every relative I had.
You think you would, but the psychology of cognitive dissonance suggests otherwise.
How so?
Cognitive dissonance occurs when we hold 2 conflicting beliefs simultaneously. In this case, one belief is, my mother told me our family consists of these specific people.
Right.
And the second belief is, this government document says there are 3 others. The psychological stress of that conflict is immense.
Oh, I bet.
To resolve it, human nature inherently protects the established narrative. We actively seek reasons to dismiss facts that disrupt our foundational understanding of our lives.
Because it's just too much work to rewrite everything you know.
Upending your family history is emotionally exhausting. We want the map to remain accurate, even when we are staring right at a street that shouldn't be there.
So he just sits on it, he lets logic quietly assert itself in the background, but he doesn't tear the house apart.
Yeah, you just get it, files it away.
He notes that the timeline creates a massive fracture, though. Because if this man George was living with his mother and these 3 unknown kids in 1939,
Right.
at a time when none of the 4 known Bridlington brothers, the author, and his 3 siblings were even born, the math gets incredibly complicated.
It doesn't add up.
He realizes that George could not, in practical terms, be the biological father of all of them. But like you said, life simply gets in the way.
Exactly. He had a career, a family, daily responsibilities. The unanswered question lingered, but it wasn't pursued with any real urgency.
Until the stroke.
Right. That is until his circumstances drastically changed. Some years later, he suffers a slight stroke.
And that completely shifts the dynamic of the search.
It does. Because suddenly he is forced into convalescence. And convalescence provides him with something he hadn't possessed in abundance before, which is time.
Time to think. He writes that recovery requires patience, and patience creates space. That really struck me.
It's beautifully put.
When your physical body forces you to start moving, your mind has nowhere to go but into the blank spaces you've been ignoring.
In the quiet space of that physical recovery, the distraction of daily life is just stripped away. So the anomaly from that 2001 email begins to sharpen.
It demands attention.
Exactly. The structure he believed to be solid no longer feels secure. He isn't just mapping distant ancestors anymore. He is looking at his own mother, his own origins, and acknowledging that the foundation is riddled with holes.
Wow.
Once you truly acknowledge those blank spaces, especially when confronted with your own mortality during a health crisis, you can no longer ignore them.
So the investigation pivots. He shifts from questioning the documents to actively seeking out the living reality. Those three names from the 1939 register can't just be abstract ink on paper anymore. He has to know if they were real.
He needs physical proof.
So he methodically searches through electoral registers, marriage indexes, scattered references in public records. He's piecing together the outlines of actual lives, proving that these weren't clerical errors.
These were living, breathing people.
With histories that had continued completely independent of his own. And this meticulous paper trail leads him to a name. Marlene.
Marlene is one of those three unknown children.
And the author's description of their first meeting is just a masterclass in emotional realism.
It really is. It doesn't take place in a dramatic, dimly lit archive or a lawyer's office.
Right.
It happens at her daughter's house. It is intensely ordinary. There are cups of tea, familiar conversation, nephews and nieces moving in and out of the room.
Nephews and nieces he never knew existed.
Yeah.
Just sitting in a living room, drinking tea with people who share half his blood, and he's only just learning their names.
The emotional weight of that ordinary setting is seismic. And the conversation itself wasn't strained. He notes that it felt natural, less like an introduction and more like a delayed continuation of something.
Like they were just picking up a conversation that had been paused.
Right. Marlene wanted to know everything about their shared mother, her character, her habits, the small domestic details that never appear on birth or death certificates.
She wanted the human side.
And the author finds himself speaking not as a genealogical researcher, but as a son.
But the most profound moment of that meeting isn't about matching dates or comparing photographs.
Wow.
As they are talking, he notices something much deeper than a physical resemblance. He watches how Marlene speaks about her own family. She speaks about her children with this fierce pride and steadiness, with an overwhelming instinct to protect and gather them.
That maternal instinct.
Yes. And in that instinct, the author recognizes his own mom.
That is a crucial sociological and emotional turning point.
How so?
Records give us dates, locations, and names, but lived interactions give us memory and character. He realizes that his mother had always valued family above all else, placing her children first regardless of circumstances.
And he sees that in Marlene.
Exactly. Seeing Marlene mirror that exact maternal instinct wasn't scientific proof, but it was powerful human validation. It represented behavioral continuity.
Wow.
And it's during these conversations with Marlene that the story opens up to the tragedy of the other two siblings from that 1939 register, Pauline and Brian.
Which brings us back to the image I asked you to picture at the very beginning of this deep dive.
The pub.
The pub, the harbor lights. This is, without a doubt, the most heartbreaking detail in the entire memoir.
It is devastating.
Let's look at exactly how this happened. Through Marlene, the author learns about his unknown brother, Brian. Brian knew he had a mother out there. He didn't know precisely where she lived, but he knew she was somewhere in the coastal town of Bridlington. So Brian spent his summer holidays walking the streets of that town. Just walking the streets with hope, searching for her.
And through one of Brian's children, the author later discovers the specific geography of that search.
The actual locations.
Yes. During those summers in Bridlington, Brian would frequently visit a particular pub to ask the locals if they knew her. The pub was called the Harbor Lights.
And the author was managing that exact pub at the time.
The sheer statistical improbability is staggering. You have to consider the geography of Bridlington, the number of establishments, the timing of the shifts.
It's chilling. This wasn't just about being in the same town at the same time. Brian may well have stood at the very bar where the author was working.
They could have been face to face.
The author might have poured him a pint. Two men connected by blood. One desperately searching for his mother. The other completely unaware that the search was taking place within arm's reach.
Just serving drinks.
Right. They could have exchanged ordinary words about the beer, completely oblivious to the connection that bound them.
It forces us to confront the devastating role of chance. The author agonizes over how easily the narrative might have changed. Like if Brian had just mentioned casually that he was looking for his mother.
If he had just explained his story to the bartender.
Exactly. If he had spoken her name aloud in that crowded room.
But he did speak her name. That's the tragedy of it.
Oh, right. The name.
Brian was asking people if they knew a woman named Constance, because that was her formal name.
Her legal name.
Yeah. But in Bridlington, among her friends and the people who frequented that pub, she was known simply as Connie.
The missing syllable.
One syllable kept two brothers in the dark.
It is a profound example of how language and informal social structures dictate our realities. I mean, the formal documentary name on a birth record doesn't always match the spoken lived name in daily life.
Right, nobody called her Constance.
Had Brian asked for Connie, someone in that pub, perhaps the author himself, might have recognized the name instantly. The connection could have been made in an afternoon.
In a split second.
But the question was never formed in exactly the right way, so the answer was never given.
And Brian passed away without ever meeting his mother. He died without ever knowing how close he was.
That is just so sad.
The author writes that this knowledge sits quietly with him. Not exactly as regret, because he couldn't have known, but as a ghost story. The ghost of a life that could have been, missing each other by a single word in a crowded pub.
It haunts him.
It really does. When he eventually tells his two remaining Bridlington brothers about this widening branch of the family, their reaction is incredibly calm, though.
Really? No shock.
There is no resistance, no upheaval. The family had simply expanded. But even with all of this emotional confirmation, science hadn't spoken yet.
Yes. The paper trail versus the biology.
Everything still rested on records, conversations, and situational logic. The margin for uncertainty, however small, still existed.
Which brings us to the technological revolution that completely alters the trajectory of this search. The introduction of consumer DNA testing.
Now, let's look at the timeline, because it's vital to understand why he decides to take a DNA test in the first place.
Okay.
By the time this technology becomes available, he already possesses a significant amount of situational logic regarding his own birth. He was born in 1951.
Right.
He has documented proof that by 1951, the man on his birth certificate, George, was living in Barrow-in-Furness, which is on the completely opposite side of the country from Bridlington.
The geography is documented, and the timelines are clear. Marlene confirmed that George and the mother did not spend holidays in Bridlington during that period.
So they weren't secretly meeting up.
Right. The overlapping opportunity for conception simply did not exist.
Exactly. So whatever the birth certificate said, biology has its own calendar. He already knew George couldn't physically be his father.
He knew that for a fact.
Yeah. So he wasn't taking the DNA test to figure out his own paternity in relation to George. He was taking the test to answer a broader question about his brothers.
Exactly. His three older brothers, Maurice, Alan, and Malcolm, were all born between 1941 and 1945.
So during the war.
Right. Their dates of birth sat much closer to the period when George and their mother were known to be together. The author wanted to establish if George was the biological father to any of the older Bridlington brothers.
He describes submitting the sample as feeling surprisingly ordinary. You spit in a small plastic vial, seal it in an envelope, drop it in a post box, and log into an online account to wait.
It's so clinical for such an emotional thing.
Right, but behind that simplicity is 20 years of quiet, accumulating doubt. And when the results arrive, there is one figure that absolutely leaps off the screen.
The percentage.
Yes. It doesn't give him a name, but it gives him a glaring, undeniable fact: 53% Danish.
53%. Now, we need to pause here and thoroughly explain what that number means scientifically, because consumer DNA testing can sometimes be misunderstood.
Wait, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here. Because I've heard people talk about their DNA results, and they say things like, oh, I'm 3% Neanderthal, or I have 2% Mongolian DNA from some ancient migration.
Sure, people say that all the time.
Isn't consumer DNA testing notoriously noisy with these ethnicity estimates? Couldn't that 53% just be background genetic noise from some distant Viking ancestor 800 years ago? Like, how does he know this means his father is Danish?
That is a fantastic question, and the distinction between trace DNA and a dominant percentage is the absolute core of genetic genealogy.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you see a result like 2% or 3%, You're absolutely right. That is often trace DNA. It can be noise, it can represent an ancestor from many generations ago, or it can be a reflection of historical population movements like the Viking expansions you mentioned.
Right, just ancient history showing up in your spit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But autosomal DNA, which is the type of DNA these tests analyze, is inherited in a very specific mathematical way.
Okay, break that math down for me.
You inherit exactly 50% of your autosomal DNA from your mother and exactly 50% from your father. Full stop.
Makes sense.
Every generation you go back, that percentage halves. You get roughly 25% from each grandparent, 12.5% from each great-grandparent, and so on. It dilutes rapidly.
So it cuts in half every step up the tree.
Yes. So mathematically, it is utterly impossible to inherit 53% of a specific ethnic marker from a distant ancestor. The only biological mechanism that can result in a 53% inheritance is if one of your immediate parents was 100% of that ethnicity.
Because 50% from the father plus a tiny 3% trace from the mother's side equals 53%.
Precisely. 53% is not an echo, it is a megaphone pointing directly at a parent.
Wow. And the author had absolutely no known Danish ancestry, no stories, no surnames, no hints passed down through the generations. Denmark had never featured in his understanding of who he was.
Complete blank slate.
And George, the man on his birth certificate, the man from the 1939 register, was entirely British. He was certainly not Danish.
In that single moment, looking at a screen, whatever theoretical possibility had remained quietly dissolved.
Gone.
The map he had followed since childhood didn't just shift, it was incinerated. His biological father was undeniably a Danish man.
And the way he reacts to this is just wonderful. It's not despair.
No, not at all.
The very first person he rings is his daughter, Tracy. And he says he felt almost buoyant. He gets on the phone and tells her plainly, "I'm a Viking."
That's amazing.
It's said half in humor, but the relief and excitement are genuine. After decades of the paternal line feeling uncertain and murky, he finally has direction.
He has a compass heading.
Right. He doesn't have a name yet, but he has a country. He has a coastline. He has a history.
It's a remarkable emotional pivot. But the scientific implications of that Viking discovery demand immediate comparison.
Because of the brothers.
Exactly. The Danish percentage didn't arrive in isolation. It formed part of a larger, unfolding picture about his brothers. To understand the truth properly, he needs a baseline to compare it against. So he asks his older brother Alan to take a DNA test.
The logic makes perfect sense. If they share a father, their broad ethnic patterns will align.
Right.
If they don't, the differences will clarify the picture. So Alan agrees, he spits in the tube, and when his results arrive, the contrast is absolute.
Stark.
Where the author's results showed a dominant 53% Danish component, Alan's are overwhelmingly British. He has only about 4% attributed to broader European ancestry.
This phenomenon is known as structural divergence. To understand this, let's use an analogy.
Oh, I love analogies. Go ahead.
Think of autosomal DNA inheritance like mixing paint. Imagine your mother is a bucket of blue paint and your father is a bucket of yellow paint.
Okay, got it. Blue and yellow.
You, as their child, will be a mixture of those two. You will be green. Every child those two parents have together will be some shade of green.
So maybe light green, maybe dark green, but definitely green.
Exactly. They won't be the exact same shade because the genetic mixing process recombination is random, but they will all undeniably be green.
Right, because they are pulling from the same two buckets.
But when the author looked at his brother Alan's results, he wasn't looking at a different shade of green. He was looking at purple.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Alan had pulled from the blue bucket, their mother, but the second bucket was completely different.
The divergence was too vast to be explained by the random variations of recombination. What the author is observing here cannot be dismissed as analytical error. DNA doesn't simply reveal connections, it serves as a ruthless revealer of separations.
So the author is Danish, Alan is British, they do not share a father.
Period.
The logical next step would be to test the other two brothers, Maurice and Malcolm. But sadly, by this time, both Maurice and Malcolm had passed away. Direct comparison wasn't possible. The physical buckets of paint were gone.
Right. He can't test them directly.
So how does he proceed?
He has to transition into indirect testing. He begins examining the close DNA matches for both himself and Alan. He's looking for overlapping patterns. And he notices a young man who appears in both his match list and Alan's match list.
A shared match between them suggests maternal inheritance, right? It aligns with their mom's side. They are both seeing the blue paint, to use your analogy.
And that pattern strengthens exponentially when he notices that this same young man also matches strongly with a female he recognizes immediately, the daughter of his deceased brother Malcolm.
Oh. Okay, so Malcolm's daughter is in the system.
Yes, this alignment confirms something fundamentally important. The maternal line is behaving exactly as expected according to the laws of genetics.
The blue paint is everywhere.
Exactly. The shared DNA through their mom is intact and mathematically consistent across the author, Alan, and Malcolm's daughter.
Which means the divergence he's seeing elsewhere, the complete lack of shared paternal DNA, is real.
It's mathematically proven.
Gradually, the picture clarifies. The author's Danish clusters are completely distinct. Alan's British clusters are completely distinct. As he reviews the ancestral matches he can infer from the descendants of Maurice and Malcolm, there is absolutely zero evidence to suggest a single shared paternal line connecting all four of them.
The conclusion, as he notes in the memoir, doesn't arrive in a dramatic flash of lightning. It settles quietly.
The numbers just don't lie.
The math leaves no room for debate. He realizes that there are at least 3 paternal lines involved in the creation of the 4 Bridlington brothers, possibly 4.
4 brothers.
Yeah.
Raised under one roof, sharing one name, standing on separate biological foundations. He says this wasn't chaos, it was structure, revealed layer by layer.
I love how he frames that.
Me too. Families aren't always constructed in the straightforward, linear way our childhood brains assume. The DNA wasn't accusing his mother of anything, it was just clarifying history.
Just laying out the facts.
But now he has a new, incredibly specific mission. He knows he is looking for a Danish man. The narrative propels into this intense, almost forensic phase of the search. He has to learn how to read the genetic code.
Which requires an entirely different skill set from traditional paper genealogy.
Yeah, microfiche isn't going to help him here.
Knowing you have Danish heritage is one thing. But a percentage on a screen isn't a person. Taking a DNA test is simple. Interpreting the raw data behind it is highly complex.
I want to spend some time here because the author talks about watching countless videos, listening to lectures, trying to understand these complex terms, centimorgans, segment triangulation, shared matches, clustering tools.
It's a whole new language.
He realizes that the ethnicity estimate, the Viking percentage, is just the flashy surface layer designed for marketing. The real investigative work lies in the match list.
Let's break down those terms because they're the mechanics of how he ultimately solves this mystery. Let's start with centimorgans.
Okay.
When you look at your DNA match list, you don't just see a name, you see a number, usually abbreviated as CM.
Yeah, I've seen that on my own results. It will say shared DNA, 800 cm. What does that actually mean? Is it a physical distance?
It's not a physical distance like inches or centimeters. A centimorgan is a unit of genetic probability.
Probability, okay.
Think of it as measuring how likely it is that a specific block of DNA will remain intact, meaning it won't break apart when it is passed down from parent to child during meiosis.
So the higher the number?
The higher the number of centimorgans you share with someone, the larger the unbroken blocks of DNA you both inherited from a common ancestor.
So it's literally measuring the mathematical distance between you and a stranger.
Exactly. A parent and child share roughly 3,400 centimorgans. First cousins share around 800 centimorgans. Third cousins might share 50 centimorgans.
So you can count backward?
By looking at that number, the author can mathematically predict exactly how many generations back he needs to look to find the ancestor he shares with a match.
And what about segment triangulation? That sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It's actually very similar to how police triangulate a cell phone signal using 3 cell towers.
Oh, cool.
In genetic genealogy, if you have 3 people who all match each other, and they all share the exact same specific segment of DNA on the exact same chromosome, you have triangulated them.
So what does that prove?
It mathematically proves that all 3 people inherited that specific piece of DNA from one single common ancestor. It eliminates coincidence.
That is fascinating. So his philosophy becomes simple. The more data, the better. He uploads his raw DNA file to every platform he can find. Ancestry, Chum3NE, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA.
He's casting a wide net.
He wants maximum exposure because a crucial match that is invisible in one database might appear clearly in another.
It's a highly strategic approach. Volume alone doesn't bring answers, but volume reveals patterns. And amid these expanding lists of distant cousins, a pattern finally emerges.
It's a breakthrough.
2 specific matches stand out. They're both estimated, based on their centimorgan values, to be his second or third cousins. But more importantly, when he looks at their public family trees, Both of these matches share the exact same pair of great-great-grandparents.
Oh, wow. So the centimorgan values align perfectly, and that ancestral couple appears consistently in the triangulation. So the
Yes.
logic forms. If these two matches share those great-great-grandparents, and they both match the author at that specific genetic level, then it is a mathematical certainty that the author descends from that ancestral couple as well.
Exactly. They become his absolute focus.
But here is the pivotal point of tension in the search. Finding an ancestral couple from the 1800s is a massive breakthrough, but it doesn't give you a father.
No, it just gives you a starting line.
Right. The generational spread from great-great-grandparents down to the 1950s contains multiple branches, dozens of descendants, and endless possibilities. So he doesn't rush. He spends years doing this incremental, painstaking work, mapping descendants, checking timelines, comparing centimorgan values, following branches forward through time.
Which is incredibly tedious work.
And here is where we hit what I think is the most profound psychological and cultural blind spot in the entire story.
Ah, yes. The surname issue.
Up to this point, for years, the author had instinctively focused entirely on the male lines of descent. He was following surnames. He was tracing fathers to sons, assuming the answer would sit neatly within the paternal spine of the family tree.
It's what everyone does.
I have to admit, if I were doing this, I would do the exact same thing. We are conditioned to look for the surname.
We are, and it is a massive trap for genetic genealogists. We have to unpack the sociology of this.
Let's do it.
For centuries, our historical, legal, and genealogical records have been organized around patriarchal naming conventions. Surnames were established largely for the purpose of taxation and the inheritance of property passing land from father to son.
So traditional genealogy was never really about biology. It was about property rights.
Exactly. It was about documenting who owned the farm. Surnames are passed from father to son, so when we search for a father, our brains subconsciously search for a continuous surname. We follow the name.
Because it's easy.
It's logical based on how society documents itself. But DNA does not care about our societal rules. It is biologically incomplete to only track the male line.
I love how you phrase that. DNA does not care about our societal rules. It reminds me of tracking a river.
How so?
Well, if you follow a river on a map, it might change its name 3 times as it crosses different county lines or national borders.
Right, like the Mississippi turning into something else.
Yeah, but the water itself, the actual physical substance, is exactly the same. Following the surname is like only looking for water where the map says River Smith and completely ignoring the water flowing right past you just because someone renamed it.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the trap the author was stuck in. He was looking for the male surname, ignoring the water flowing elsewhere.
This is where a third cousin match enters the story and changes the paradigm entirely. She's a genealogist, too. She understands centimorgans, she understands clustering, and she looks at his data.
An expert eye.
They start comparing notes, narrowing the branches beneath that shared ancestral couple. And she gently points out what he had completely overlooked because of his patriarchal blind spot.
The daughters.
Yes. The decisive connection did not lie exclusively in the direct male surname line. It lay in a female branch descending from the same ancestral couple, a daughter's line, one that the author hadn't prioritized simply because the surname had changed through marriage.
It's a beautiful moment of mental correction. As she points out, autosomal DNA follows inheritance, not surnames. It passes through mothers and fathers equally.
Biology doesn't change its name when it gets married.
Exactly. Once he makes that mental pivot, abandoning his reliance on the surname and simply following the biological water, the structure of his family tree tightens incredibly quickly.
The generational distances suddenly align perfectly. The centimorgan values make total, undeniable sense. And within that female-descended branch, there is a man. Not a vague possibility. A specific man. A man of the right age. A man placed in the correct generational position. A man whose circumstances as a Danish national allowed for plausible proximity to the British coast or his mother at precisely the right time.
Everything clicks.
For the first time in this 2-decade journey, the search narrows down to an individual. The line that began as a vague 53% Danish estimate now traced to a name. The search had moved from a coastline to a family to a branch and finally to a man.
But as any good investigator knows, circumstantial logic and mathematical probabilities still require absolute confirmation.
You can't just guess.
Right. A hypothesis is just a hypothesis until it is tested against a direct control. And the final piece of this puzzle, the ultimate confirmation, comes through an incredible stroke of collaborative luck regarding data privacy.
Yes, the genealogist's cousin puts him in touch with a woman who turns out to be the niece of the identified Danish man.
The niece.
She had taken a DNA test previously, but her results were set to private. Because of that privacy setting, she had never appeared in the author's match list.
She was invisible.
She had been present in the database all along, sitting right there holding the exact answer he had been searching for since 1999, completely beyond his view.
When she agrees to unlock her results, and her DNA is checked directly against his, the alignment is absolute.
The moment of truth.
The centimorgan count is definitive. The mathematical probability leaves zero room for doubt. Her grandfather was the man the author had identified through the female line, and that man was his biological father.
At 68 years old, the author finally confirms the identity of his biological father.
That's 68. Wow.
And I want to talk about the emotional tone of this resolution because it subverted every expectation I had.
Really? How so?
When you watch a movie or a television show about this kind of genetic discovery, there is always a dramatic weeping moment, a tearful confrontation, a swelling orchestral score, a sense of massive upheaval. But the author says there was no dramatic moment, no fanfare, just convergence.
Just convergence. That's an incredibly powerful, grounded phrase. Finding his biological father didn't feel like the end of a frantic search, he writes. It felt like the answering of a question he hadn't even known he was carrying.
Because for most of his life, the name George on his birth certificate had sat quietly in the background. It hadn't defined his daily existence, even when doubt entered the picture after that 2001 email.
Exactly. But when confirmation finally came from the niece's DNA, something internal settled. The question of his origin had always been there, unspoken, unformed, a blank space on the map. Now it had an answer.
It's profound.
And finding that answer didn't overwrite the 68 years of life he had already lived. It simply clarified it. It replaced decades of assumption and cognitive dissonance with undeniable scientific understanding.
Which brings us to the reflection, the overarching theme of this entire journey. We have to ask the ultimate question. What does this all mean for his identity?
The big question.
Look at what has happened. The paternal structure of his families had been completely shattered. The four Bridlington brothers, who had stood as a unit for decades, raised under one name, were now scientifically proven to not share a single biological father.
Right.
They shared a childhood, but they didn't share a paternal chromosome. You would think that kind of revelation would fracture a family. You would think it would destroy their sense of brotherhood.
But the beautiful, profound paradox at the heart of this memoir is that the DNA revelation did exactly the opposite.
It really did.
It didn't destroy the family, it illuminated the true anchor of their lives. As the paternal lines diverged, as multiple fathers were revealed, one truth became clearer and more undeniable than ever before.
Mom.
The overwhelming, unchanging constant in all of it was Mom.
She was the axis around which everything turned. Whatever the complexities of those adult relationships were in the 1940s and 50s, during the chaos of a world war and its aftermath, whatever the circumstances that shaped the beginnings of these children, she was the one who raised them.
She held it all together.
She created stability where she could. She gave them a shared environment under one roof, shared memories in Bridlington, shared loyalties. The author comes to this incredibly profound realization. The brotherhood they carry was not written in their chromosomes. It was written in lived experience.
And in many ways, the cold, hard science of genetic genealogy actually reinforced what life had already demonstrated. Think back to the indirect testing.
Oh, with Malcolm's daughter.
Yes. Every shared match between the author, his brother Alan, and his niece confirmed that the maternal line behaved exactly as it mathematically should. The maternal inheritance was pristine and intact.
It never broke.
The science proved they were Mum's sons. That was never in doubt. The DNA didn't weaken their bond. It stripped away the patriarchal assumptions of surnames and birth certificates and revealed the true biological and emotional foundation of their connection.
And his perspective on his mother is just so full of grace. He acknowledges that her life, seen now in this much fuller context, was far more complex than he could have ever understood as a child.
Of course it was.
He says it would be easy, from a distance of several decades, to judge her choices or to try and simplify her life into a tidy narrative. But he chooses not to.
Because judging from the future is a luxury that ignores the harsh realities of the past.
That's a great way to put it.
She lived within her circumstances. She made decisions within the world she occupied, a world vastly different from our own. A woman raising multiple children during the rationing, fear, and social upheaval of a world war faced unimaginable pressures.
Unimaginable.
She carried her responsibilities forward, she kept her children fed, and she raised them to be a family.
When I look back now, I do not see scandal or disruption, he writes at the end of the memoir. I see resilience.
Resilience.
Finding his biological Danish father answered one very specific genetic question. But recognizing Mum as the constant answered a much larger, more important question about who he is.
Identity.
He realizes that identity is not built solely on DNA. It is built on who raises you, who shapes your character, who anchors you when the world is chaotic. The confirmation of his paternal line didn't close the book on his family history, it just turned a page.
Because the other brothers still have their own lines.
Because if his line required reconstruction, so too might the lines of Maurice, Alan, and Malcolm. Their stories deserve the same forensic clarity. But whatever those future investigations might reveal, one truth would remain perfectly intact. They were connected first and foremost through her.
Fathers may differ. Historical circumstances may vary. The ink on a birth certificate may lie. But the constant, the one overwhelming, undeniable constant was Mum. And the journey, strengthened rather than shaken by that truth, continues. It is a masterful reframing of what it means to discover a hidden family history. It's not a story about betrayal or secrets. It's a story about survival, resilience, and the enduring structural power of maternal love.
What an unbelievable journey. From a casual search for dates and names on microfiche in the late 90s to a 20-year odyssey that spanned government registers, tragic near misses in a Bridlington pub, the cutting edge of genetic triangulation, and ultimately a profound philosophical acceptance of what family truly means.
It's been an honor to unpack it.
It proved that family is built on who shapes you, far more than just the biology you inherit. So I want to leave you with this to mull over today.
What?
If the ink on your own foundational document suddenly faded tomorrow and the biology you always assumed to be true was completely rewritten, what are the lived experiences, the unspoken shared histories that would still hold your identity together? Who is the constant in your story?